Hello everyone. Welcome to our weekly webinar for Business Performance USA. We're so happy to have you in the audience today, and we look forward to this webinar that's given to us by our executive presenter, Dr. Jefferson Stewart. His topic today is change implementation. We all know about change implementation. In fact, every one of us has had to implement change. We do it on a daily basis. And so we're glad to welcome Dr. Stewart to talk about this very pertinent topic for all of us. I'm your host. I'm Cynthia Stewart, the Managing Partner for Evermore Services, and I will walk you through today in support of Jeff. We also have a co-host, Victor Dominguez. Victor is very good at asking Dr. Jeff questions about what he's talking about. So we look to Victor to add his comments and questions to whatever Jeff is talking about today. You know, this is a fun thing for us to do, and we want to make sure that you're interacting with us. To make this hour worth your time, please be sure to look at the questions and enter any of your questions on the question tool. You'll see that on your desktop dashboard for GoToWebinar. Also, we want to make sure that if you have any questions about your workplace, go ahead and email Victor at businessperformanceusa.org. And remember to visit YouTube to watch previous webinars. We do record these webinars and we show those on YouTube, as well as if you go to businessperformanceusa.org, in the members forum, you will see those webinars. Okay, with that, we're going to talk a little bit about Jeff, Dr. Jeff, as I call him. Dr. Jeff is the single agent to Board of Trustees, Board of Directors, and CXOs. He has helped numerous companies, in fact more than 400 by his count across his career, to gain rapid progress in the marketplace. He helps to put companies together with their intellectual property and knows a lot about intellectual property and how to protect and raise the bar with your intellectual property rights. He also has served as, he's currently serving as the Chairman Emeritus for the American Society for Competitiveness. In this role, what he has done has served this great organization across the years. They bring together university intellectuals as well as business, and they talk about this wonderful topic of competitiveness. He's awarded many different organizations and their leaders for their competitiveness in the marketplace for a variety of topics. So Jeff, the other thing about Jeff that you need to know is that he has been a leader in his faith communities across the years as an elder at large, and also within the Boy Scouts. He's an Eagle Scout. So we welcome him. He's a guy you want to know and you want to listen to. And with that, I'd like to pass this over to Dr. Jeff, and we can start with the next slide. Thank you.
Well, implementation. For a long time, people have talked about making change happen, leading change, executing a change plan. They've been talking about a lot of things. One of the problems has been metrics, which is a cultural phenomenon. People want to measure what they want to see and how they want to look, and they want it to be as close to perfection as they define it to be. The problem, of course, with metrics is that they are dependent on interactions, and interactions are dependent on people who are either subjects or objects in the action set that we call a proposition or a testable position or a sentence. One of the clever ways people have had of making the point in the past is that interactions make people speak in a way that they will be sentenced by their own sentences. It is a clever way of acknowledging that we are always responsible even when we feel our most irresponsible, that we're always responding even when we have decided not to. There's something about being present that is very important, and something about being really present that is most important of all. But even if we decide to absent ourselves, we can be present in our very absence. And that is somewhat of a verbal puzzle, not so much of a visual or graphic or lived puzzle. So what does it boil down to when we get back to implementation after that sort of round of language? It boils down to knowing what's right, knowing what's right to do, knowing what the right time is, and knowing where we may be in the sequence of time that is required to bring something to pass. That is to bring it forward from our receiving and push it through what we have to add to it into a place where it is pulled for further value add. All of that seems fairly simple and straightforward, even if it is a bit abstract. But let me make it a little bit more real even than that. What it boils down to in implementation is being ready to use the right tool for the right job at the right time. Not only the first time, but every time. And you can play games with saying every time is the first time, or the first time I ever thought about every time I was bowled over by all the things that I had to worry about, and so on and so forth. And what you're doing is looking at the shadow we cast. We are looking at the ability to approach excellence from the past or from the future. It's really interesting. If we look closely into our past, we cast a shadow into our future. It may be a near shadow, a short shadow, if we're sort of at high noon on the job. Or if we look into the future, where we see some light at the end of some tunnel, then we may be casting a shadow in our past. And that will determine the view that we have of our experience and our data. So let's move on a little bit so it doesn't get too crazy on us. What it boils down to is that people are implementers. Victor, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Thank you, Dr. Jeff. Victor Dominguez here, everyone. Welcome. And I'm working on your comments, and let me see if I can just unravel this a little bit. What I hear about decision making is, in fact, sometimes, because you talked about that, and what I believe I hear saying is that even a no decision by itself in its own right is a decision. Being a implementer and managing change requires that you have a perspective of the history in the past, and that you can best determine whether immediate action or a recourse or redirection of action is warranted, or if a no decision is appropriate, and allow the momentum to go in its current course, because as you use your shadow analogy, that rooted in the past allows you to at least project near term into the future with some greater measure of confidence.
Well, I think that's pretty close, Victor. The point I'm really trying to make using the shadow analogy is that the length, depth, strength, and perspective that we have on our shadow is the most critical element in our outlook, or our in-look, if you prefer, our ability to introspect and see what the experience we've had as people in a work environment may portend for us in the future. So the paradoxical piece of it, at least apparently, is that the less brightly you can see into the future, the less focus, the less intensity, the less purpose that you bring to a future view, the less clear your past view will be. It's if you look deeply into the past and you have really good data, you have a very precise view of what our metric may have been, the form of what we have accomplished may look like for others as well as ourselves, but you're casting a very dark and hard shadow into the future when you do that. And we often don't turn around and look at that shadow we cast into the future. That shadow is kind of like a puzzle piece, and it sort of sets up the shape of the future for us. Now, is the shadow real? Well, of course, we can actually measure the length of a shadow given a sense of where the light's coming from and so forth and so on. We actually have software that does that today in visual graphic systems. And the fact is we have certain forms of software in finance and in operations and in scheduling and other areas that allow us to do something similar, but we often don't think about it that way because it is a mathematical construct, and most of us really prefer to just have the math work for us, kind of like lights turning on when we throw a switch. So I moved to the shadow image because what we actually see when we throw the switch on our supported mathematics, on the structures and the flows of our systems, is the dynamic shifting in our access to past data and our ability to share a harder view of the future. It's tough because the present keeps moving as well. Anyway, that's the physicist thinking about things, and it probably is a little bit confusing to be in words. So I wanted to move back into the world of people rather than the world of physics and math for a minute. People are implementers. You know, they are tool makers and tool users. What few people realize in the world of manufacturing is how important something like NCMS is, the National Center for Manufacturing Sciences, and how crucial people outside the United States and North America actually see it as a role that's being played in the success or lack of success in our economic structures. However, it's pretty easy for people to see tool users. NCMS is all about tool makers. What about those who use the tools? And that's where I'm headed today, because people as implementers not only make tools, that's kind of a scientific and technological process that customizes to the individual worker, but people use tools. And few people actually ask the tool user what it is that works best for them, how it works best for them, what they could do different, and what other tools they might need. The fact is that if you want to better understand your business process and the changes that people go through every day, which is the baseline for making any other significant change that you may want to in your business, you have to have a better sense of the tools that are required by each worker. Tools expand our awareness of what's going on, both past and present and future. They actually intensify our ability to think, our cognition. They intensify our capabilities. They bring them closer together. They kind of kit them up. And they allow us to say, oh, bring me that drawing kit over there. Bring me that portfolio over there. And so on and so forth. Or they do something else. They make our capacities more fulsome, more capacious. I know that's a use of the base root, but capability means we have the ability in a certain capacity. Capacity means that we have a determined or defined or a flexible and plastic capability. And that interaction is crucial to understanding how thinking works for people who work. Now, all of that use of the word work is actually using that word in the same way in different parts of a complex set of differentiated functions from a mathematical point of view. If you were doing intelligent planning and scheduling systems or working with those who do, like I did for so many years, you'd find that language to be imprecise and very difficult to deal with, the same way you find it a little bit difficult to follow. So you'd want to splay it out in terms of formulas and programs. Basically, these formulas and programs are either conceptual tools or technological tools that focus our scope. That is what we see before us and what we can do, or behind us and what we come from. They leverage our scale. They give us the ability to find a fulcrum, a point of leverage that allows us to reach or move things that we don't believe we otherwise have the capacity to handle. That takes capability and expands it. Or they extend our reach. That is to say, they expand the domain of our awareness and the ability we have to understand more about the world, which wants what we are doing. So people are basically implementers. You know, I love the wrench in the hand of the person down there, because change is wrenching. It really is. And people are used to experiencing that as sort of off-putting or offsetting or putting them off kilter. But if you think about it as a tool set, a wrench that actually goes to the job, you realize it has to fit and somebody has to manage it, has to handle it. So basically, let's go back one more time and dive a little bit deeper into the way we have experienced this for a long period of time. There is really a very, very old Latin phrase that sociologists and anthropologists have been familiar with in our last century quite a bit, and the phrase is homo faber. That is the human builder, or as some people like to translate it quite literally, uh, although I don't like the translation much because I think it's kind of misogynistic, man the builder. It's also a little bit pompous. The human builder, however, is something that we need to pay attention to. It's a fact, by the way, that many other animals build things, all the way from ants and mud daubers to, chimps in the 100th monkey syndrome. We all handle tools, and as a fact, we are implementers, and the human builder implies that people who implement are people who put ideas to work. They put ideas to work by forming concepts. Concepts literally mean what we grab on to reality with our minds. And tools, on the other hand, are those concepts enacted in tangible form for us to execute our plans with. Not just against, but with. Some tools are plans, for sure, but some plans require more defined and customized tool sets and tools. So the human builder realizes basically one thing: how to go about implementing change, how to implement changes. It's the first question that comes up when somebody says, hey, I would love to have this suit, but it needs to be fitted. And the person on the sale says, how do I make this difference? They call the tailor and they hand that off, and there's a markup and there's more value-added service and so on and so forth. This is a build-up that's different from the build-up in a factory or even a build-up out on the ground in a farm, whether it's a family farm or a corporate farm. But it is nonetheless a build. And the human builder is the one who realizes it, who makes it real. Well, I'm about ready to dive again into the pool. Is there any questions set around what I just said, Vic?
Well, I'm thinking about the human builder. It's not so much a question. I'm just trying to put in perspective, again, your foot in the past, looking to the future, and thinking about human nature. And when I look at humans as builders, in that ancient phrase you speak of, I think of past civilizations, the Hittites, and their technology, their building, leading to the Roman building, leading to cathedrals, leading to modern day. Our capacity to build is insatiable, and we're building at a faster rate than ever before. What's intriguing in terms of the shadow, if you will, from ancient civilizations or humans' nature to build, much of that history has been lost, has not been recorded yet. Our pace these days of building and implementing is also matched by our ability to record and document what's going on. And it's an interesting dynamic of our ability to build and our ability to understand our past and record it. And that's going to forever be cemented. The record of what we're doing now is going to match our rapid growth. So I know that's a little abstract, but that's what you're triggering in my thoughts.
Well, you know, it's real interesting. We consider all that a little abstract because we don't remember it. You know, we don't pull it together. We don't take all the parts and make a whole out of them in our time. That's quite literally what the phrase remember means. Pull all the members of this set of things that we do into a view of the present. And, you know, we leave some things out, we put some things in, we edit it. That's called redaction. We we go from there, and we sometimes just create new stuff. We reuse as much as we can because we're also uh, you know, almost obsessed with efficiency in our time. That is, how to get the biggest bang for the buck, the most out of the moment, and so forth and so on. The the thing that we have to do is understand that this has indeed been going on for thousands of years, that we haven't recorded it, and there's probably virtue to some degree in forgetting a lot of it, but that we can't forget all of it. In our time, for example, people worry about the economy overheating when we are moving at such a pace that we can't keep solid track of it and do something important with the records we've got. We can't carry that value forward into another setting. Oh, well, the economy's overheating. We just can't track the value, so therefore it must be inflating. Well, that may be an unwarranted conclusion. We don't know that because we don't have the empirical readout or the framework or the pattern recognition sets that allow us to go for that. But what it boils down to is, where is our experience as human beings? We have to do the reading. We have to interpret the fact, and we get caught up in the cycle of interpretation sometimes and forget how to judge what may be valid data, what makes it significant, what impact will it have if we look this way or that way instead of the other way, and what is the overall meaning of it. You know, there is the true human question. And in the end, you know, you deal with people like the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, who's just gone before Congress, and what he says is, you know, things have changed. I've got to tell you that what I saw as facts 10 years ago are different from what I see as facts today, and I have a different opinion about what we need to do. And the senator who was questioning him says, well, are you telling us that you have changed your mind? Because he's quite an icon of value in our currency system. And he says, well, Senator, when the facts change, I change. I don't know. How do you do it? You know, it's kind of interesting that when we are building things, we have to be very wise. And we're hearing basic wisdom come forward here about how humans take what's possible and act on it, and therefore create economic value. This is a deep dive, but it's also extremely tangible and very practical. It's not above people's heads, it's down below their feet. It's in the earth underneath the place where they stand. And getting it straight about where to put your feet and where to stand is also a way of saying you have to define your really present moment. Because you go from acting to what's real. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. What's real is, at least as close as people come in their sensory systems, is sometimes called socially facts. The factuality, the fact is, but we'll come to that in a little bit. Now, I know this sounds like philosophy, but it's called practical philosophy. I know it sounds like philosophy. It's called business philosophy. I know it sounds like philosophy. It's called the love of wisdom about our way we build and act on what we build to create economic value. You know, there's that funny word economics again. I'm not going to belabor it with an etymology or any philology, but I'm just going to tell you this. Economic literally means home rule. The ability to regulate and rule your home is the basis for the way we consider our value in our culture. Whether it's the home we build and live in or the home that we have to take care of and build up to protect, that is the way we work. We build our leaders, for example, so that we can build our businesses. We build our businesses so we can build our value, because we want to have very focused, highly disciplined, and running organizations for whom control is no longer an issue, and only the thing that we focus on is growing a more valuable and better place to live. So therein is the origin of economic value. If you're interested in your business, in securing a future, you have to be interested in securely implanting the urge to serve as a leader by doing one thing, by decisively using the right tool for the right job at the right time, first time and every time. The decision is yours. From the time you roll over and get out of bed with or without an alarm to the time you do it again the next day. You can even think of your dream life at night when you sleep as coextensive with your waking life, to the point where the dreams you make real, that you make come true for yourself and others, are an extension of what? The processing time that we go into when we sleep to refresh our bodies. If we refresh our economies by being, in a sense, the right tools for the right dream at the right time for our world, then what happens is we securely implant an urge to lead our world in a decisive fashion. Now, I know that's huge ideas. I'm certainly not without perspective, but I'd like you to just ask me any questions you have there right now before I move into what I've heard some people call the mother of all slides, because it's a slide about business and change and transition and leadership and management and all of that. So if there's anything that needs to be sort of cleaned up in the housekeeping around my language here, I'd like to do it right now.
I have
So,
one
Dr.
question.
Jeff, I'll jump in on that. This is Victor Dominguez again. When you speak of tools, oh, I'm sorry, Cynthia. Why don't you go ahead?
It makes a lot of
I don't
sense
want
to
to cut
me
you
to
off.
use the right tool, the right, for the right job, first time, every time. So that assumes that you know what the right tool is. And you know the best timing for using that tool. Any insights or suggestions on how do you know you got the right tool and how do you know it's the right time?
Oh boy, I always knew there'd be somebody in the peanut gallery here who'd start throwing peanut shells on the floor. Anyway, I do love going to a good barbecue, and peanut shells on the floor are a good thing in my world, as long as I get a good brew with it. So the way you know is by making your order. When you go to that barbecue place and you start snacking on those peanut shells and tossing them at each other with questions like that, what you have to do is make the right order, the one that's good for you, that's healthy for you, that tastes good, that is easy to prepare, that gets there on time, that delivers all the things that you want at the right form and quality that you ask for, the right kind of substance for your health and well-being. So, Cynthia, the answer to it is orders. You either have to sell and earn the right to fulfill the orders from somebody else, or you have to take orders in a world in which everybody always knows what they want and you have no idea. Those are the two extremes. So, how do you do it? You engage. There is, as Cynthia has talked about, I think in other webinars, a culture of engagement that is required in order to be a human that builds things. Without engagement, building is essentially valueless. And therefore, the ability to build both for change and to protect us from unwanted change is compromised if you're not engaged. Let me move on then, Victor, unless you have another comment.
I'll just.
I guess you're going to wait. Okay.
Oh, well, my only clarification, Dr. Jeff, is when you speak of tools, just to clarify, I figure you're speaking of certainly physical, mechanical tools. You're also speaking of hardware, computers, software, algorithms, systems, platforms, programs. The interpretation of tool is a wide interpretation, including the human element, and that is, creativity, ingenuity, So am I correct in that expansive definition of a tool?
Yeah, you are, and it's a definition that I'm happy to expand, at least by implication, because the popular phrase, "Oh, he or she's just a tool," is something that I truly object to, and I suggest that trying to put people in a tool category like that is a way of dehumanizing the use of tools and some way taking away one of our essentially humane ingredients where the world is concerned. You know, by reducing tools to a flat format or even a point of distant focus, what we do is lose full perspective on reality. And so it really is more than anything else a kind of cynical expression of distrust in the world. So I'm very happy to expand on tools and on the ability to build your leadership, build your company, build value, and to basically understand all of that as a growth process. Now, I will just footnote really quickly, Victor, that there is such a thing as uh, creative destruction. It has been recognized for as long as people have recognized their tool making and tool using abilities. Um, but it has come about as a recognition of natural forces first and foremost, and it has been projected into the environment in many, many other ways. What I'd like to also suggest is that people who destroy and claim to create by doing so are those who are really creating destruction. That is, they're only creating chaos. And what we want to do in a true business world is take the implicate order in a chaotic world and make it and explicate it, make it plain for those who find a way to do something valuable with it. And if we move to the next slide, which is slide 6, you'll see what some have, as I mentioned before, called the mother of all slides. And it's really just a symbol with a whole bunch of examples of what tool issues may be. And I won't try to explicate the whole thing, but I'd like to note that we've used this slide on transformation before. What's new in this slide is a triptych in the middle, and that triptych is basically represented by the bold letters M/M, D/D, and D/N. And those are kind of like spectra of behavior and process in each case. M/M would be make and market, from manufacturing to the market, from the raw material all the way to the front shelf and the transaction. We call that go-to-market in today's language, but technically speaking, it is a spectrum from make to market. We call another one the D/D, design and development in the old days, but today it's design in order to develop, or what most people today prefer to say is design to adapt. Now, I will point out that there are, because of creative destruction and disruptive activities in the marketplace, a need to consider it design to develop even then, and develop to design as part of the loop, and that adaptation may be insufficient to account for revolutionary breakthroughs when they do occur. Those things that historically we've called paradigm shifts. Paradigms cannot be harnessed. They are forces of nature that come from the very heartbeat, the angle at the center of our vision, the pulse of our footprint on the planet. They are so small in some senses that they are subatomic, and they are so grand and great in other senses that they are, macrocosmic. So paradigms are things that point us beyond where we are, either past-wise or future-wise, and oftentimes laterally as well. We know that we can have a bias or step sidewise into the future and sort of wait for things to take shape for ourselves. So design to develop and development of design are things that we need to consider when we design to adapt, and that's why I call it D/D. It's another spectrum and a cycle. Finally, there is the innovation element within a business and its cultural setting. And I call that D/N because the N is different than you see the parallelism of the first two because it stands for novation. Now, technically, in legal terms, novation is when you take one article and replace it with another. You put something new in place of something that didn't work as well. And that is a restricted usage that has happened as we've restricted our language into the present day, but retained our legal tradition. So if we look at novation in a broader sense, we're talking about the innovation spectrum or the innovation loop in a business. There's another element to the replacement, and that's the discovery of what needs to be replaced. We have to literally take the cover off and find out what's not working. Discovery means to uncover and look at what's possibly broken or could be better. And so innovation is a specialized loop within business itself. Some cultures value it more than others. Underneath, you'll notice that we've put change leadership and change execution so that there is a clear alignment with the prior webinars I've given and these inner loops. And I'm pointing to change implementation as the root source of innovation in all time and all place, not just in each time and any place, okay? So you have to be homo faber. You have to be a human builder in order to really appreciate innovation as something that actually happens. So herein, of course, we see the questions that address what you were talking about, Victor, and we see this big old sort of kidney-shaped loop around the whole thing. It's kidney-shaped because we have to make room for that funny thing up there called business culture and strategy. It sort of pushes down in on us and it says, wait, you know, whether you know what you're doing or not, something big and long and huge is going to have an impact on you. And here are the things that we have discovered in culture and business activity that you have to pay attention to with the long view in mind. So it sort of takes that big outer loop and it makes it kind of kidney shaped. I really appreciate this slide a lot, and we'll be coming back to it many, many times as a basis for future work as we go forward the rest of this year and into next year. So I'd like to move on at this point unless there's any specific questions.
All good, Dr. Jeff.
All right, here we go. Here's the main item. You know, I'm going to show what this means a little bit differently by reaching back to a slide from the last two presentations, in fact, from my first three this year as well. But the main thing is practice doesn't make perfect, ever. Practice is perfect. This side of some projectable empyrean realm, some heaven, whether it's removed in time or space or brought to us on earth full form as if an alien had landed, we as humans practice because that is what makes us perfectly human. Practice is perfect. And when we go into business, this has real implications. Now, you've all heard of the Pareto principle. We all use it, the 80-20 rule or the 20-80 rule. It doesn't really matter how you say it. I've set it up here to show that there is a leveraged relationship between the 20% and the 80%. And what makes the 20% very important to the 80%, so that we understand there is not an opposition or a huge difference. There is a huge leverage in relationship between the 20 and the 80. And I refer to this as basically effing the ineffable. Now, people who don't know English very well are going to say I've just said something that's untoward, but I haven't. The verb to F means quite literally to work. That's where the word effort comes from. To apply yourself with strength to the problem at hand and not be drawn away from it. To F. to F the ineffable, to take on that which is otherwise imponderable, unworkable, unconsidered, for some people impossible or improbable. To F the ineffable is what makes it possible, working in a team, to truly compete. So the 20% of effort you put into collaboration on an idealized model yields a 4x return through competition. In competing, we actually are taking our teams and putting them into play in some season across some field or discipline of activity. So what we're doing is taking order out of chaos. We're taking discipline from the control world, and we're oscillating and balancing our role in the chaotic with our desire and our blessed rage for order. What we're doing is actually pulling ourselves through with a huge focus on discipline, on making sure that our footprint in the past is smaller and the shadow we cast in the future is greater, so that we require less data out of the past and we can acquire more significant projectability into the future. What's the point? When we have a mission in business, we work that mission. That's what operations means. When we take our mission and put it to work, we create value. And that crazy big word up in the corner there, teleology, simply means that we spend time focusing on our goals. What's the direction? What's the purpose? What's the objective of our activity? And if we're looking at collaboration or working with others, we're looking at something which language in our time has come to call socio-technical. Now, I'll be very clear. That's in reserved usage in North America, by and large. But if you go into so-called developing countries, which, by the way, are pretty much where we were 25 years ago now, so that calling them developing countries is just saying that they're like we are, and we're back at the point where we're pretty much on a par, developing or not. We are not the developed world. It's not all said and done. That's a 19th century idea that continues to ghost us with the notion that what's been proven is all it takes to go forward. As you know, that's not a true fact, as we would say. It doesn't line up with the idea that practice is the perfection of human life. So socio-technical is the word that has come to represent the interactivity of tradition and all the values that we as humans hold dear with our ability to apply techniques and kits of techniques and tools to create technological civilization. And, you know, I remember the first time I ran into it as a keyword for an entire culture of the quality movement in Mexico and in Central and South America. For them, it was obvious a socio-technical vector. That meant the social values on one hand and the technological on the other, and somewhere between the two there was a combined value moving forward, a force of change. So they were very, very focused on order out of chaos, and to me it was an eye-opener, because here were people who knew that no matter what others did to them, they could sell their way out of a hole. They could open new markets. They could create new value. And, you know, here were we in North America trying to slow it down because we weren't sure we could keep up. It's a crying shame, to be honest with you. But, you know, that's just my opinion. I am HO, and unfortunately I don't always sound so H. So here we are. We're looking at competing, at the interaction of controls and disciplines, that is rearward facing and forward facing positions in our points of view on life. And one of the things we realize is that when we create value through teams and put them into action, we're actually getting results. These results are what we create facts out of. If we don't have results to measure or to respect or to look at or to point to, we can't factualize. We cannot say this is indeed been done. The word fact comes from the Latin word facto, facere, to do, okay? And facere, to do, is really what we're dealing with here. Empowering people to get results that they agree make a difference in their world. This is why, in the end, what we do when we compete is build economic value. It is the single most powerful way of concentrating the build of value in the way we live that there has ever been found. Yes, it requires collaboration, but that's not in opposition to competing. By disciplining ourselves in our collaboration, what we do is we get a huge leverage moving forward in and through the disciplines of teamwork and self-discipline. So the benefit of all of this practice is perfect approach in business is that priorities always stay weighted toward a disciplined future. And, you know, my reminder there is that priorities, of course, mean what we do first and what we do second. It's all about sequencing and dynamically balancing that as things change around us. So priorities have to stay weighted toward a disciplined future in order to get the leverage that comes from an economic buildup. In this rather big picture, then, how does that apply to implementation? It means that we kit our futures. What does that mean? We pick the tools that we put together with the techniques we care to use and the overall interpretations of how to get it done which work best for us and our customers and clientele. And in doing so, we create a future that is empowered by our ability to use tools to implement. Now, the reminder coming forward from the last two is that the half-life of objectivity is a culturally dependent variable. You know, who is the subject? Who is the object? Is there any question at this point before I move on and deal with that in a slightly more grounded and summative fashion from what I've said in the previous two?
Dr. Jeff, Victor here, and
Yeah.
I guess my key takeaway, I appreciate this. I think in terms of competitiveness, if one can find the discipline and fortitude to F the ineffable, in other words, to work the unworkable, and see their 4 times return, that is by itself a tremendous competitive advantage. So the takeaway is don't be afraid of the tough stuff. Stick with it. Don't give up, and you'll pass the barrier where many, if not most, hit the wall.
Right. I talk about it as FAST, being flexible, agile, speedy, and tough. Your use of the word tough brought that acronym to mind, and it's not so much speed or even the ability to control through acceleration and deceleration and all the curves that life throws at you, as much as it is about synchronization. And, you know, synchronization is a hurry up and wait game. You know, it's so strategic that you have to stay prepared all the time. You know, you hurry up and wait, you hurry up and wait. You just get it done. You have to be fast, flexible, agile, speedy, and tough. And if you don't know what I mean, I want you to think about firefighters at an airport where a jet's going to crash land. They spend 98% of their lives being prepared, and they spend 2% of their lives saving lives and making all the difference in the world. So fast, agile, strong, and tough, speedy, and tough. Thank you. Let me move now to the closing slide for this, and it's also a setup slide for the next series. Victor, you brought up the phrase effing the ineffable. That is working what others think is the unworkable. It is the modus operandi. You know, we're familiar with that from detective stories, the MO of the evildoer. But, you know, there are good doers, not just evildoers. And the good doers have a modus operandi as well. They have an MO. There's a character to the way they live and work and breathe and enjoy what they bring to the world. And that modus operandi has 2 dimensions, as I'm pointing out. The now dimension, where the subject matter or the technical exercise is what we do dollar for dollar, and where the on the far end, the cultural artifact, where objectivity is concerned, is factuality. So in Effing the Ineffable, we realize that we're all about operation. You know, in business terms, the COO is an undervalued person in today's world. They truly are. We've made far too much out of the braid on the bridge of the battleship of life, and far too little of the cat who has risen from the ranks or moved into the ranks and operates in the way a leader operates among other people who lead as things need to be accomplished in their own areas. So the COO is tremendously important, and they are the ones who really control and discipline the move between actuality and factuality, between what people are doing now and what everybody will concede or consent is of great value. The payout in the end is always energized tool cultures. You want them filled and energized. They have to be cultures where tools build together, and where, having built together, substantial measurable gains are the product. So energized tool cultures can be said to build substantial measurable gains, and here's the key phrase, over and over again. It is not and never will be crazy to do what works better over and over again. That is the definition of practical sanity, of social value, of economic value, and of the strongest technologies. The ability to characterize our world in a way that constantly can be counted on to improve our lives. Now, with that, there's a lot that could be said, but I'll leave that for some future messaging that will give people a sense of where we're headed. Ownership excellence is the third OE in our pack. You've talked about operating excellence, Victor, and of course I come back to the people who do operations in this slide as well. And I claim that operational excellence is, along with organizational or cultural excellence, the keys to two doors on the ownership excellence platform, the door in and the door out. You get into it with operational excellence, you get out of it what you put into it, and that is organizational excellence. The value you get when you've built your business properly by building leaders in the first place and growing the business, and then growing the business to add full value, value that will keep growing. That's your exit point. All of us want a legacy, but we all want a legacy that, like I said before, has a footprint in the past, but is weighted at some point of leverage into the future. Those who do business valuation will easily recognize how difficult it is, without going to a public market and huge public expectation, to leverage more than 3 to 4 or maybe 5x out of any business, no matter how well and smoothly we make it run.
Well, Dr. Jeff, thank you so much for all of those insights regarding change implementation. We're so glad to hear about your perspectives on this and to see the mother of all slides, as well as your wonderful slide that helps us really understand how to ramp up our position in the marketplace. Folks, we are continuing with our series on Tuesdays. I'll be talking about problem solving as your silver bullet. It may be of interest to you if you want to know that, guess what, your problem solving approach may be actually driving your costs higher and your returns lower. So come back next week and hear me with problem solving as your silver bullet. And then we will welcome back Nancy Roberts on her excellent series on background screening. So we look forward to that. So we have a couple of minutes. What we'd like to do real quickly is to take you out to the VPUSA. We call it VPUSA for short, but it's businessperformanceusa.org. Here you see the home screen, and all you need to do to log in and become a member is to press that Become a Member button on the website, and Victor's navigating for us. We've gone actually directly to his webpage. You can see that it looks a lot like his member page. This is his wall, and if you would like, you can go out and see other members You can see that we have blogs available for you, where you can see that we have our videos all keyed up for you. So we'd like to invite you to join businessperformanceusa.org. It is at no cost to you. Our executive presenters have teed up these webinars and blogs for you, and you can meet other great folks that are interested in business and moving their businesses forward. So with that, Victor, if you can take us back to the last slide. I just want to thank the audience today. You've been a great audience, and we look forward to having you back to the Business Performance USA webinars every Tuesday, noon Central. Thanks, everyone. Go out and make it a great day. And thanks, Victor, for all your comments on this webinar today.
You're welcome.